Hi. I hope this works. It's the first time I've tried doing this. Happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. We are going to talk again about common denominators. If you remember common denominators, common means same, and denominator means piece, the same piece. So we want to be sure that we are creating fractions that have or that are using the same size pieces. For instance, if you look at your first problem here, take this paper out, we're going to look at 1/5 and 1/2. Actually, I'll use purple like it is here. 1/5 and 1/2. Which is also, if you look at your fraction pieces, if you find 1/5 and you find 1/2, you put that in front of you now. If at any time you need to stop and pause while you're doing your work, please do so, okay? Anyway, here's my 1/5 and 1/2. These are not the same size pieces, are they? So we want to find an equivalent fraction to 1/5 and an equivalent fraction to 1/2 that are using all the same size pieces. And to do that, you need to have a common denominator. So if you played with your fraction bars, you will eventually would find out that if we put 1/5 into tenths and the 1/2 into tenths, you would see that then we have 2/10, and over here we have 5/10. So now we have changed 1/5 to 2/10 and 1/2 to 5/10. And here is the common denominator. So the common denominator, I'm just going to do it called CD just to make this easy for me to write. Common denominator is 10. If we were to do it on paper using the magic 1, like we've been practicing before, and if we did not do it with our fraction bars, it would look like this. Times what equals, and we know it has to be a 10 down here, right? So if we had our magic 1, you would see that how do we go from here to here? 2/2. 1 times 2 is 2, 5 times 2 is 10. And if you look, it's also on here already for you. So an equivalent fraction of 1/5 is 2/10. Now let's find the equivalent fraction to 1/2. 1/2 times what will also give us a denominator of 10. Remember, we're trying to find our common denominators, equivalent fractions with the same denominator. And if we did the magic 1, we got to think to ourselves, how do we get from here to here? Well, 2 times 5 and 1 times 5, 5/10. And don't you know that 5 is half a 10? So we know that's an equivalent fraction to 1/2. So our final answer would be equivalent fractions. If I have to use a common denominator to find equivalent fractions for 1/5 and 1/2, I could do 2/10 and 5/10, and they have the common denominator. That's my final answer. And if you look on your paper, we have 2/10 and 5/10. You can fold this in half if it's too much for you to look at. Now we're going to go down to the second problem, 1/4 and 2/3. If you would like to try to do it on your own, go ahead and stop the video, but I'm going to go ahead now and do it on the board, okay? I'm using a new eraser. Look, it makes it erase easily. Okay, let's do 1/4 and 2/3. And it says here the first thing we need to do, right, is find a common denominator. So I want you to think 1/4 and 2/3. If you need to use the fraction bars, go ahead and stop the video and do that. We can do it here too if you want, if that helps you to figure it out. Remember, we have the 1/4 and 2/3, right? We want to make them all have the same size piece, which is also known as finding a common denominator. We could do it by using the magic 1 too. If you think to yourself, if I think about the multiples, remember a common denominator really is a common multiple. If I thought 4 and 3, remember how you did this the other day? You made the little multiple chart? 4, 8, 12, 16, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Oh, I see a common denominator. 12. So you could do it that way to find it. You could also use your fraction bars. And if you pulled out the 12ths, which are the black ones, you would see we could divide 1/4. We could rename it into 3/12. We could also rename 2/3. Also, it fits perfectly, as you can see. 2/3 can also be written as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8/12. 1/4 can be rewritten as 3/12. Again, common denominator, we're using all the same size piece. But let's go ahead and do it on paper, or on the board instead of the fraction pieces. If we have 1/4 times something, and we know we're using 12ths because we want to put them both in the 12ths, what would we have to multiply 4 by to get 12? Well, you can imagine the magic 1 is there, or actually I already drew it in here for you. Times 3, so 3/3. 1 times 3 is 3. So 3/12 is our first answer. Then we need to find an equivalent fraction to 2/3 that also has 12 as the denominator. So again, we're going to use the magic 1. And we know 12 is going to be here as our common denominator. Okay, so how do we go from here to here? Times 4. So we're going to do 4/4. 2 times 4 is 8. So our final answer would be, and I just don't have room to write it, but 3/12 and 8/12. Those are two equivalent fractions that have the same denominator, same common denominator. And the reason why we're learning how to do this is that we're going to start adding and subtracting fractions, like I think we did a little bit of last week. But I want to be sure you have a solid understanding of this. So be able to find common denominators is going to help you add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers. Okay? Go to number 3, 4, and 5. I would like you to stop the video and do these on your own, and then restart it, and I'm going to put them up here, and we're going to do them together so you can check your work. Okay? So go ahead and stop. Okay. So now I'm assuming you have done number 3, 4, and 5. let's go over your answers. For number 3, we have 5/6 and 1/3. A common denominator that you could use, there's actually many common denominators. You could simply put the 1/3 into 6. Or you could look at this and say a common denominator could be 12, or it could be 18. Any of those could be a common denominator. And if you ever get stuck, you always just do your multiple chart to the side. 6, 12, 18, 3, 6, 9, 12, etc. And then you can see, oh look, 6, 12 are common ones. So in this instance, there are several correct answers. If you did 6, this one would stay the same as 5/6, and then the 1/3 would become, 2/6. So that could be one answer. If you did 12ths, you could have done 5/6 times something equals 12. You probably could have done times 2/2 and gotten 10/12ths. And then 1/3 times something gives us 12. 4 4/4, 4/12ths. That could have been an answer. Or you may have done 18ths. And if you did 18ths, your answer would have been 15. That's a 5. 18ths. And 6/18ths. So any of those could work. Number 4. You have 3/5 and you have 1/3. A common denominator, I'm just gonna, as I like to do, is just CD for short, would be 15. 15 would be a good one. I suppose you could use 30 if you had to, but 15 probably is the best one to do. If you did 3/5 and you used 15ths, nine 15ths, and then 1/3, five 15ths. So there you have 9/15ths and 5/15ths for number 4. Lastly, number 5. We have 1/2 and 3/8. Now this one you could have done in many ways. The easiest way, I believe, would be just to change the half into 8ths. Because this is already in 8ths, you could change that into 8ths to 4/8. And then 3/8 stays the same. That's one way. Perhaps you use 16ths. That could work too. 1/2 times what equals 16ths? Well, then you would know 8/8. 8/16 we know is equal to 1/2 because 8 is half of 16. 3/8 times something, well, it would be 2/2, right? 8 times 2 is 16, 3 times 2 is 6. So your final answer would have been 8/16 and 6/16. Or, if you'd done the first way, it could have been 4/8 and 3/8. Okay? I hope that all makes sense to you. Go ahead and stop the video for now.